Hello, today we will talk about stories that happened in Airbnb locations. Let's go to the first story. What if it's true? I will never be able to sleep peacefully in my own house again. Even after changing all the locks, installing cameras in every room and reinforcing every window, I still wake up in the middle of the night with that feeling, the certainty that someone is watching me from the shadows. Because now I know that sometimes monsters don't need to break down your door. Sometimes you invite them in yourself. As a homeowner in South Carolina, I started renting out rooms on Airbnb to supplement my income. It was the perfect arrangement. I traveled a lot for work, so the house was empty most of the time anyway. The only requirement was that the master bedroom where I kept my personal belongings remained locked. Ryan seemed like the perfect guest when he booked 3 nights in March. 5-star reviews, full verification, smiling photos with his family. Just a quick business trip, he said in the chat. Perfect. His checkout was scheduled for Monday. I was set to return from my trip on Tuesday night. 16 hours of flying had left me too exhausted to do my usual house check. I just locked the door and collapsed into bed. If only I had checked the cameras first. I woke up around 3 in the morning with that feeling. You know, that primal instinct that tells you something is wrong. The air felt different, heavier. The sounds of the house weren't right. At first I tried to rationalize it. Old houses make strange noises. The exhaustion from traveling was making me paranoid. But then I heard it. Soft footsteps in the hallway, so light they almost seemed like my imagination. I grabbed my phone and opened the security camera app. My heart nearly stopped. The kitchen camera showed that a large knife was missing from the knife block. And worse, there were signs of recent use in the sink, dishes I hadn't left there. Someone was in my house. Someone was moving freely while I slept. With trembling hands, I started reviewing the previous recordings. That's when I saw it. A figure stealthily moving through the hallways over the past 24 hours, entering and exiting my master bedroom. The room that was supposed to be locked. I paused the video on a frame where the figure passed by the window light. My blood ran cold. It was Ryan. My last guest, who should have left more than 24 hours ago, had been secretly living in my house. The recordings showed his pattern. During the day, he hid in the master bedroom. At night, he roamed the house, eating my food, using my bathroom, even wearing my clothes. In one particularly disturbing video, he stood in front of my bed for almost an hour, just watching me sleep. How did he get into the locked room? The answer came in another video. During his official stay, he had made a copy of the key. The cameras caught him in the act, using molding clay to make an imprint while he thought no one was watching. And now he was somewhere in the house, armed with one of my kitchen knives, and he knew I was awake. The creaking of my bed must have given me away. Panic started to set in. Should I try to run, scream for help? What if he was waiting for exactly that? As silently as I could, I dialed 911. The operator understood the seriousness of the situation when I whispered that there was an armed intruder in my house. Don't hang up, he instructed. Officers are on their way. Can you lock yourself somewhere? Safe? My bathroom had a reinforced lock, a precaution I had installed after a break-in years ago. I began moving slowly toward it, each step carefully placed to avoid making noise. That's when I heard the voice. No need to call anyone, Ryan said calmly, emerging from the shadows of the hallway. The knife gleamed in his hand. We're just 2 roommates sharing a space, right? You didn't even know I was here until now. His face looked different from the profile pictures. His eyes had a feverish, manic glint. And his smile. That smile haunts me to this day in my nightmares. You know, I've been watching you, he continued, stepping closer. Your habits, your schedule. It's fascinating how Vulnerable people are when they sleep, how they trust they're alone in their homes. The sound of police sirens shattered the moment. Ryan blinked as if snapping out of a trance. For a terrifying second, I thought he was going to attack me anyway. But then, he bolted toward the master bedroom. The police arrived within minutes, but Ryan had already escaped through the back window. They found the knife abandoned in the yard, along with a backpack containing disturbing items, surgical gloves, ropes, and a notebook filled with detailed notes about my routine. The scariest part, the notes didn't start with his official stay. There were observations from weeks before. He had been watching me long before making the reservation. The Airbnb stay was just a way to gain initial access to my home. The police said there wasn't much they could do. No physical violence, no significant theft. It was just a case of trespassing. Airbnb banned his account, but how easy would it be for him to create another with fake documents? I installed more cameras, changed every lock, added motion sensors. But the real invasion wasn't of my home. It was of my sense of security. Now every noise at night makes me freeze. Every shadow could be someone watching me. Every new guest could be Ryan with another name, another face, waiting to return. Last week, I found something that made me put the house up for sale. A torn page from my personal journal, which I keep locked in my room. Written in handwriting I recognized from the camera footage. Thanks for the hospitality. Your next home looks lovely too, especially that kitchen window that doesn't close properly. See you soon, roommate. Because now I know the most terrifying truth. Ryan didn't want to steal anything. He didn't want to physically hurt me. He wanted something much worse. He wanted to live in the shadows of my life, watching, waiting, turning my own home into a prison of fear. And somewhere out there, he's looking for his next roommate. So if you use Airbnb, double-check that locked room. Because you never know, maybe your guest never really left. If you liked the first story, leave a like and comment on what disturbed you the most. Now let's move on to the second story. It's funny how the human mind works. When we need to escape the stress of the city, we look for isolated places, quiet, far from everything. We never think that sometimes the real danger is in that very isolation. The cabin looked perfect in the Airbnb photos, hidden in the mountains of Virginia, surrounded by dense forest, with no neighbors for miles. The owner, Jack, had excellent reviews. Everyone praised the peace and tranquility of the place. The drive was long but relaxing, until I saw them for the first time. Two men standing by the side of the dirt road watching my car pass. It wasn't their appearance that was unsettling. Dirty jeans, faded t-shirts, low-capped hats covering their eyes. It was the way they stood, like predators studying their prey. At the time, I dismissed the feeling of discomfort. Rural area, different people, big city paranoia. What an idiot I was. The cabin was even more isolated than I had imagined. The access road barely deserved that name. It was more like a trail cutting through the forest. My cell signal died about 2 miles before I arrived. The first few hours were exactly what I needed. Absolute silence, interrupted only by the sound of the wind in the trees. No phone notifications, no work demands. Perfect. Around 5 in the afternoon, I realized I needed supplies. The owner had mentioned a small market about 15 minutes away by car. The trail seemed even more ominous at dusk, the trees creating tunnels of shadow. It was on the way back that I saw them again. The same men, now closer to the cabin. When they noticed my car, they moved quickly into the forest. Not like people, startled at being caught doing something wrong. It was a fluid, practiced movement, as if they knew the terrain well. Something inside me screamed that this wasn't normal. I called Jack, the owner, but it went to voicemail. I tried the local police, but the signal was too weak to complete the call. You're being paranoid, I told myself, locking all the doors and windows. They're just locals. Then, the power went out. It wasn't a normal power outage. There was no flickering, no sound from a transformer. The lights just went out, as if someone had turned them off directly at the breaker. The cabin was plunged into absolute darkness. The kind of darkness you only find far from civilization, where there isn't even the distant glow of other houses or streetlights. I used my phone's flashlight to find the bathroom, the only room without windows where I could lock myself in. That's when I heard it, footsteps on the porch. Not trying to be silent, they were deliberate, heavy, meant to let me know they were there. The sound of glass shattering followed. Someone had broken the kitchen window. I locked myself in the bathroom, trying to control my breathing, which was now far too loud. The glow from my phone's flashlight felt absurdly bright in the dark, so I turned it off. The silence that followed was deafening. "We know you're in there," a rough voice called from the hallway. "We have the master key. It'll be easier if you cooperate." Master key. The words echoed in my mind. How could they have a master key unless Jack, the owner, was involved? The sound of a key turning in the lock confirmed my worst fear. The bathroom door slowly creaked open, revealing a tall figure holding a flashlight. The beam of light momentarily blinded me. "Wallet, phone, laptop," the voice ordered. "And don't try anything heroic. My friend outside isn't as polite as I am." I handed everything over, my hands trembling. The figure grabbed my backpack and stuffed everything inside. In the brief moment when the light shifted, I saw his face, or rather the mask he was wearing. A cheap plastic Halloween mask, but there was something deeply unsettling about the way the eyes behind it studied me. "Good choice," he said. "Now stay here for an hour. No funny business. We know where you live in the city." How did he know I was from the city? The answer was obvious, my Airbnb profile. Jack had given them everything they needed to know. I waited far longer than an hour before coming out of the bathroom. The cabin was a mess, drawers open, furniture overturned. But the worst part wasn't the physical damage. It was the feeling of violation, of knowing that this place, which was supposed to be a refuge, had been a trap. The police arrived the next morning. They asked questions, took photos, promised to investigate, but their looks said it all, just another case that would likely never be solved. "Happens more than you'd think," the older officer commented. "Tourists alone, unfamiliar with the area, easy targets." I tried calling Jack multiple times. Every call went straight to voicemail. Airbnb removed the cabin listing after my complaint, but a week later, the same place appeared on another rental site, under a different name. The investigation led nowhere, of course, but I found something disturbing during my own research. Over the past 2 years, 3 other guests had reported similar robberies at properties in the area, all run by different owners, but with the same pattern: remote location, power outage, intruders with a master key. Last week I received an anonymous message. "Hope you enjoyed your stay. Maybe we'll meet again on your next escape to the mountains." Attached was a photo of me, taken through the cabin window before the robbery. I was reading a book, completely unaware that I was being watched. In the background of the image, reflected in the glass, I could see Jack holding the camera. Now I understand that this was never just a random robbery. It was a calculated operation, a trap for naive tourists like me. Jack probably has multiple cabins, different identities, a network of owners luring people into isolated locations. I never rented anything in remote areas again, but sometimes, when I'm home, I catch myself wondering, do they really know where I live? Am I the one being watched through my windows now? And whenever I get a booking request for my own apartment on Airbnb, I can't help but double-check the name of the guest, looking for any variation of Jack on the list. So, did it scare you? Leave a comment about the story, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. Now let's move on to the last story. Some trips change you forever. not because of the fun or happy memories, but because of the terror they leave imprinted in your mind. Our post-graduation trip to the mountains was supposed to be a celebration. 5 friends, a secluded cabin, 3 days of peace away from civilization. But what we found in those mountains made us question everything we believed about reality and nightmares. The Airbnb looked perfect in the photos. A rustic but comfortable cabin, surrounded by towering pine trees, with a deck overlooking the valley. The listing briefly mentioned a tool shed on the property, but no one paid much attention to that detail. We arrived late Friday afternoon. I, Emily, Lucas, Carla, and Daniel. The sun was already setting when we finished unloading the car. It was Daniel who noticed it first, deep footprints in the soft dirt near the deck. Too big to belong to any animal in the region. Must be the caretakers, Lucas suggested, but his voice betrayed his uncertainty. The marks looked strange, as if whoever made them had been carrying something very heavy. The shed was visible from the kitchen window, a decrepit wooden structure, partially covered in ivy. We tried to ignore it on the first day, focusing on settling into the cabin and preparing the barbecue we had planned. It was during dinner that we noticed it for the first time. That smell of cigarettes, strong, pungent, mixed with something else, something metallic. It came in waves, carried by the wind blowing from the shed. No one lives for miles, Emily commented, uneasy, and that shed looks like it's been abandoned for years. But the smell persisted, and with it, we started noticing other disturbing details. Shadows moving at the edge of the forest when no one was there. Metallic sounds coming from the shed at night like tools being dragged. The next morning, driven by a curiosity that now seems insane, we decided to investigate the shed. The door was unlocked, creaking ominously as we pushed it open. The interior was one large room, filled with rusted tools and other things. There were clear signs of recent occupation, a filthy mattress in the corner, empty cans of food, dozens of crumpled cigarette packs, and on the wall something that made our blood run cold, photos, dozens of them, all of groups like ours, taken from afar, without the people knowing they were being watched. Night brought the real horror. We were all tense after discovering the photos, trying to decide if we should leave immediately. That's when we heard it, a scream that didn't sound human or animal, something between agony and fury, echoing through the forest. Lucas ran to the window. "There!" he shouted, pointing into the darkness. In the middle of the trees, a green light pulsed. It wasn't like anything we had ever seen. It looked sickly, unnatural, as if the light itself was contaminated. Carla started hyperventilating. "There's someone there," she whispered, her eyes locked on a point beyond the light. Wearing a hood. Through the eerie glow, we saw the figure, too tall to be human, covered in a dark cloak that seemed to absorb the light around it. It stood among the trees, its hooded head turned directly toward our window. The scream came again, closer now. The figure started moving toward us, its movements unnatural, as if its joints bent the wrong way. The green light grew stronger with each step. "Lock everything," Daniel shouted, running to check the doors. That's when the cabin lights started to flicker. The next few hours were a nightmare. We huddled together in the living room listening to heavy footsteps circling the cabin. The green light flickered through the windows, accompanied by that inhuman scream. Every so often, the hooded figure would appear in a window, its face always hidden in the shadows of the hood. Emily discovered something disturbing on her phone. All the pictures we had taken since our arrival showed the figure in the background. In every image, it was getting closer, as if it had been approaching us little by little. Around 3 a.m., the scream stopped. The green light vanished. The silence that followed was almost worse than the horror before. No one slept. When the sun rose, we ran to the car. The local police found nothing but giant footprints and cigarette butts. The shed was empty. The photos had disappeared. Happens a lot around here, the officer said casually. Groups of young people seeing strange things in the mountains, especially near that cabin. Researching later, we discovered that in the past 5 years, 3 different groups had reported similar experiences at that property. Green lights, screams, a hooded figure. One group had disappeared completely. Their belongings were found in the cabin, but there was no sign of them. The Airbnb listing was removed from the site soon after. The cabin is still there, abandoned. But sometimes when I drive down the road leading to the mountains, I can see a green light pulsing between the trees. And on the quietest nights, if I listen closely, I can still hear that scream, that sound that shouldn't exist. Last week I received an envelope with no return address. Inside, a single photo. Our group on the cabin's deck, smiling, unaware of the horror waiting for us. And in the background, partially hidden in the shadows, that hooded figure, closer than in any previous photo. On the back of the picture, written in shaky handwriting, "You were the only ones who got away. Until now." Emily disappeared 3 days. Later, the only clues, cigarette butts in her yard and a green light seen by neighbors during the night. The police are still searching, but I know they won't find anything, because some things that live in the mountains don't give up on their prey easily. They just wait. So what did you think of these stories? Do you think they're real, or just scary tales? Leave your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and share it with your friends. Who knows, maybe they'll think twice before booking an Airbnb too. See you in the next video.